Greetings, and welcome back, listener. Thank you for joining us here at Dark and Disturbed Tales. I am your host, Steve Taylor. On tonight's episode, we find Alex and Cheeto getting to know the woods and the dangers of the countryside. What will they find during their explorations? Stay tuned and find out. So without further ado, I present to you The Day After Yesterday, Chapter 4, Smiling Faces. Written by Leon Hamilton, narrated by the Nightwatcher, starring the Ghost of 94 and Duchess of Darkness.
What was supposed to be one night turned into a partnership. Weeks passed, and Jesse's leg was long since healed. The three of them had become a team. Jesse turned out to be a much better hunter than Alex had ever been, and Cheeto absolutely adored her. The rainy season had passed, and the winter was setting in. Soon, snow would blanket the ground, and they would have to get enough food to last the harsh weeks ahead. One cold morning, while out hunting, Cheeto and Alex stumbled upon a small town tucked away in the hills. Staying hidden, he watched people moving around the town, but something about it felt wrong. After an hour or so, two men on horseback rode in, with several people bound by ropes being pulled along. As they trotted through the center of town, a crowd of people gathered around inspecting their catch. Once they stopped and dismounted their horses, the two men took their catch over to a small, dirty shack. After a long moment, a behemoth of a man stepped out. He was tall and muscular, with a big pot belly and a long, thinning gray beard. Behind him, he dragged an oversized axe that carved a trench in the dirt as he walked. The crowd parted as he passed, occasionally shoving onlookers out of his path. The men with the captives stood at attention until the big man got close. Then the two of them took a knee and bowed their heads. The behemoth stood glaring down at them for a second before turning his attention to the captives. Slowly looking each one over, he stopped and pointed a meaty finger at the only semi-healthy looking prisoner. What happened next nearly made Alex vomit. The two riders stood, then separated the guy from the group and took him to a trough on the side of the street. After stripping off his clothes, they used water from the trough to clean him up, while some of the others laid plastic tarp down on the ground. Once it was in place, the captive was brought over and stood in the center of it. As hard as it was to watch, Alex couldn't help but notice the captive wasn't fighting back. His movements were slow and uncoordinated, almost as if he'd been drugged. Before Alex could process what was going on, Alex tried to control his breathing. The old man with the axe lumbered over and stood next to the prisoner. The crowd chanted and cheered till the big man held up his hand and made a fist. Once the commotion died down, he motioned to a woman in the crowd and she quickly came over. Without lifting his axe, he tilted the handle towards her and gave a nod. Returning the gesture, The woman gladly accepted the handle and stood holding it for him. While taking a minute to look at the captive, the old man pulled a knife from his belt and showed it to him. Once the prisoner's eyes were fixed on the blade, the big guy nodded. In one swift motion, he grabbed the prisoner by the neck and swiped the knife across his stomach. The cut was almost surgical. It opened him up just enough for his guts to spill out and splatter onto the ground. The crowd went wild once again. The big man held up a bloody hand to silence them. When they hushed, he slowly lowered the prisoner to his knees, then released his grip. Surprisingly, the guy sat there without slumping over while the old man retrieved his axe. With it proudly resting on his shoulder, he strolled over and stood behind the guy on the tarp. Once he was in position, he paused to take a dramatic breath. Then with one horrific swing, he brought it down, cutting the man clean in half. After that, he hacked the body into pieces and handed it to the crowd. Alex had seen enough. He took Cheeto and moved out as quickly and quietly as possible, being sure to cover his tracks and note his location. When they made it back, Jessie was gearing up, preparing to take off again. She told Alex she'd seen smoke coming somewhere deep in the woods and wanted to check it out. When he told her about the town and what he'd seen, she looked concerned. With the winter rolling in, traveling further north would be a bad choice, and heading back into the city was very risky. The only option was to hunker down and try to sit out the winter with what little supplies they had. Their ammo was limited, and with the group as big as the one Alex had seen, they couldn't risk using it up on hunting. That night, they started sleeping in shifts. Jessie had the first watch. By the time Alex's turn came up, the snow was starting to fall. He got out of bed, added a fresh piece of wood to the stove, then bundled up. Cheeto yawned and whined in that funny way dogs do as she saw Alex heading for the door. The second he opened the door, she was on her feet and following as he stepped out. Sitting out on the front porch with Cheeto at his side, he scanned the dark woods thinking about what he had seen. He hoped coming out here would end his problems with the cannibals, but now, more than ever, he realized there was no escaping reality. Time ticked by slowly. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like forever. The cold wind whistled through the trees as the night rolled on, and snow started covering the ground. Just as he stood up to stretch, Cheeto started growling.
Shit!
Her growling turned into barking as the two men came walking out of the woods. He instantly recognized them as the men he'd seen on horseback. Alex didn't waste words. He fired a warning shot as soon as they exited the tree line.
Turn around and walk away.
A second shot rang out from behind him, and the taller of the two men's head snapped back before he dropped to the ground. He hadn't realized Jessie was awake and standing in the doorway. The second man turned to run off, But he didn't get far. She fired again, dropping him in his tracks.
What's wrong with you? You were gonna let them get away? If either one of them made it back to that town, we were as good as dead.
She was right. This was a mistake he couldn't afford to make more than once. They spent the next few minutes looking for their horses, and when they found them, something dawned on him. Jesse had shot those two men without knowing who they were or where they'd come from. For all she knew, those two were just wanderers. How did she know where they were from? Or were they from the town? How did she know? Turning to glance at her, he started questioning her. What if she'd been lying this whole time? What if she was one of them, or at least knew who these people were?
Hey, Jesse. How'd you know?
Letting out a sigh, she stopped what she was doing and put her head down.
You weren't supposed to find out like this.
Quickly pulling her pistol, she fired, hitting Alex in the shoulder, knocking him off his feet. Cheeto went on the attack, snarling and biting into Jesse's leg. Using her pistol, she clubbed the dog, causing her to yelp out in pain. Everything was happening so fast. Alex knew he only had seconds before Jesse shot Cheeto. Still reeling from the shot, he pulled his gun and opened fire. Everything went silent. Jessie dropped her gun and fell to her knees, bleeding from multiple holes in her chest. It was over. Struggling up off the ground, he heard her take one last wheezing gulp of air before she slumped over on her side. He was left with more questions than answers, plus a hole in his shoulder. Whining, Cheeto came to his side. She was bleeding from a gash on her head, but she was doing better than he was. It took him most of the night to clean himself up and seal the wound using a knife he heated in the fire on the stove. The bullet had gone clean through. He didn't know if that was a good thing or not. The pain was certainly no fun. It was days before he got around to checking Jesse's pack. There wasn't much there, but the one thing he found was a tablet she'd been using. It was filled with notes about places she'd been and a few crudely drawn maps. Other than that, there was a list of names and an old photo. There were 8 people in the picture. Jesse was next to the tall guy with the dark hair and a little girl. Next to them was an older couple, standing behind a young couple seated in chairs. Last but not least, to the far right, standing slightly apart from the group, was the big man from town. Alex grimaced at the sight of him, then put the picture back in the tablet and put it away. When he was able to get around, he went and stripped the bodies of anything useful and left them where they lay. The snow would keep them for a while. By the time they started to stink, he'd be long gone. Obviously, it was too dangerous for him to stay out here. But the city wasn't much better. The only upside was he knew the city. He survived there for the last few years. He had He hadn't even made it 6 months in the country without taking a bullet. The choice was clear, and in his mind, he was actually sort of happy with the decision, also mixed with sadness. The country life wasn't for him. By midday, he had gotten as much as he could loaded onto the horses. But before he set out for the city, he lit the cabin on fire. Watching it burn for a short while, he had a sad smile, and then mounted up and got moving. The trip home was bittersweet, admitting to himself he couldn't cut it in the country. Had dug at his pride a little, but as his apartment building came into view, he let it all go. He was honestly surprised to see it was still standing and no one had taken it over or burned it down. Now, all he had to do was unload the horses and either cut them loose or kill them for food. He chose food. It was a win. There was enough meat between the two of them to keep him and Cheeto fed for a long time. Besides, there was no way he could take care of them without attracting way too much attention. Once he had unloaded and put the horses down, he dumped their guts in the body pile at the bottom of the stairs and dragged the rest up to the second floor where his drying room was still set up. By the time he finished doing everything, he felt like he was going to pass out. He and Cheeto went up to their old apartment and settled in. They were both asleep in no time. Even though it was cold, they didn't care. It was good to be home.
Now, I present to you Chapter 5 of The Day After Yesterday, Ice Cold. Written by Leon Hamilton. Narrated by the Nightwatcher. Starring the Ghost of 94 as Alex. Featuring yours truly, Steve Taylor, as Luther.
The winter had been brutal for Alex and Cheeto. Snowstorms froze the landscape, and there was a new problem. Hordes of ravenous rats threatened to starve them out. The last of the meat he'd been able to save was holding up, but the rats were persistent. Cheeto spent most of her days sniffing them out, killing as many as possible, but they just kept coming. At one point, he tried to eat them, but there was something wrong with the meat. It tasted terrible and smelt rotten, even fresh off the bone. Aside from starvation, nightmares had been forcing him to stay awake for days at a time. The combination was starting to play tricks on his mind. A few days back, he had a standoff with a coat rack. In his mind, it was a scavenger that had broken in and was trying to kill him. He didn't snap out of it until he noticed Cheeto wasn't reacting. The morning after, he'd gone up on the roof and spotted a column of smoke somewhere deep in the neighborhood. It wasn't unusual for this time of year, A lot of nomads go to ground for the winter, but something about it bothered him. Ever since getting back from the country, he'd been paranoid. It got so bad that he had started setting up traps all around the outside of his building. Near the tree line, he had dug deep pits and lined them with sharp shards of metal and broken glass. Covered by branches and snow, the pits were nearly indetectable. If you didn't know where they were, it would be easy to walk right into one. Scanning the area through a scope of his rifle, he spotted something that made his stomach hurt. There, just outside the tree line, was a hole in the snow. Someone had fallen into one of his pits. For a second, he thought it could have been an animal, but the footprints leading in told him it wasn't. Staying still and listening intently, he waited, hoping to hear screams, but they never came. There was only one set of tracks leading in. Whoever it was had not crawled out, and no one had come to help. The odds were whoever it was either dead or too injured to move, so he wasn't in a hurry to go down there. On the other hand, the trap was exposed, and that was a problem. Cursing under his breath, Alex went inside, suited up, and went back to check the trap. The snow was nearly knee-deep, and the wind was causing flurries, making it a miserable time outside. As he got closer to the pit, he could hear movement coming from inside, and then stopped. There was a long moment of silence, then the crack of gunfire before a man called out,
"I ain't no easy meal. If you want me, come get me, you piece of shit."
Alex didn't make a sound. Slowly stepping back, he started looking around to see if anyone heard the shot. Once he was sure no one was coming, he answered back,
What are you doing here?
There was another long moment of silence before he got a response.
"I was looking for someone, and I fell in this fucking hole."
Still looking around, Alex thought about it for a second, then turned to leave. Scooping up an armful of loose snow, he started covering his tracks as he walked away. Once he'd gone a good distance, he stopped and yelled,
There's some people setting up camp a few blocks away. That might be who you're looking for. Good luck.
With that said, he finished covering the trail and went back inside. The snow came down heavy that night as Alex sat watching the pit. A part of him felt bad for leaving the guy, but the last person he helped tried to kill him. Eventually, Alex got tired and called it a night. By the next morning, any tracks that might have been there were long gone. He couldn't tell if the man had escaped, but if he hadn't, the odds were he was dead. After putting some breakfast on, he and Cheetah went to the roof to check the neighborhood. There hadn't been much activity lately. Aside from the guy in the pit and the smoke he'd seen, things were calm. The overcast skies and consistent breeze told him it was going to be an ugly day for travel. He hoped to go scavenging. The food was almost gone, and they were boiling the last of the jerky to make soup. If he didn't do something soon, they weren't going to make it through the winter. Rather than risking a blank trip, he spent most of the day poring over maps and hunting rats with Cheeto. As the sun set, he climbed the stairs, carrying his sack of dead rats up to the roof. A cold blast of fresh air washed over him as the door creaked open and the light flooded in. As bad as things were, it felt good to be outside. The fading light and the falling snow made the world seem almost normal. Taking a deep breath and heading for the far side of the roof, he hoisted the bag up and was about to dump it over the edge when he spotted something. There was a set of bloody footprints leading away from the pit. The tracks were fresh. At the rate the snow was falling, they were a little under an hour or so old. Dumping the sack, he brought up his rifle and used the scope to follow the trail. It veered off to the left and stopped. There was a large indent in the snow, with a decent amount of blood in it. By the looks of it, the guy must have fallen right there. The tracks picked back up a short distance to the right before he lost sight of them again. Judging by the direction they were headed, he was going into the neighborhood. Slightly relieved, Alex lowered the rifle and took a deep breath. He hadn't seen whoever it was, but if he was part of that group in the neighborhood, it could be a problem. Agitated, he spent the rest of the night watching and waiting for signs of anyone coming in his direction. After a long, quiet night, Alex wandered back to his apartment to get some rest. Yawning and flopping down on his bed, he glanced over at Cheeto, sleeping soundly, curled up on the rug. He wondered what dogs dreamt about. There were a few times he heard her whimpering in her sleep and imagined she was having a nightmare. That thought made him chuckle. A dog's nightmare must have been horrible. Probably had cats in it. Laughing at his own dumb joke, he realized he hadn't seen a cat in many, many years. There were rumors of feral cat colonies, but he'd never actually seen one. For the next few minutes, he laid there thinking about cats until he fell asleep. Visions of the old world flooded his mind, taking him back to a time when things were good. He could see his family and friends and the smiles on their faces as they waved him over to get in the picture. Once they were all together, everyone struck a goofy pose just before the flash of the camera blinded them all. Still partially laughing and rubbing his eyes, Alex turned to say something to his mother, but she was gone. They all were. The sunny skies and green grass slowly lost their color before the world around him melted away. What was left behind was something he hoped to forget. The day it all started. It had been a good day. He knocked out a couple of assignments at work and was on his way home in a great mood. Windows were down, music was up. He sped down the highway enjoying the breeze. One of his favorite songs had just come on the radio. When suddenly, the car lost power. Doing his best not to panic, Alex pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. As he put the car in park, a loud crash caused him to look in the rearview mirror, and what he saw made his jaw drop. Every vehicle on the road had lost power, which caused a major pileup when everyone started slamming into each other. Before the insanity of the situation could truly sink in, an odd whistling sound filled the air. Alex glanced to his left in time to see a jumbo jet smash into the ground, sending a wall of fire rolling across the highway. Gasping for air, Alex sat up and looked around. Letting out a sigh of relief, he shook his head. Cheeto sat, curiously staring at him for a moment, then came over and jumped up on the bed. She sniffed him and licked his face, which made him smile as he shoved her away.
I know. Let me grab my stuff, and we can get out.
He smiled and scratched behind her ears before getting up and grabbing his gear. Normally, he let her use the restroom on the roof, but today was different. Today, he wanted to see where those tracks led, and possibly get a look at whoever it was that was camped in the neighborhood. Traveling during the day was risky, but he knew this area like the back of his hand. All he had to do was stay out of sight and keep his distance. Thinking back on the situation, he regretted not immediately going out to follow the tracks. They would be completely covered with snow by now, but with Cheeto's help, they may be able to track him. Once they were out of the building and Cheeto finished relieving herself, they went to the pit. Staring into the hole left by the visitor, Alex shook his head. It would take at least an hour to repair the damage, but he wasn't about to waste any more time. Scooping up as much of the bloody snow as he could find, he held it out to Cheeto for her to get a scent. She sniffed it, then devoured it, and started wagging her tail. Smiling, Alex nodded and let her off the leash.
Go get him.
Giving her a good head start, Alex waited until she was out of sight to get going. Following the trail she'd made took him through the burnt section of the neighborhood. He avoided it, mainly because there wasn't much there, but that wasn't the only reason. Shortly after the riots, he had gone there to scavenge and found bodies burned in the rubble. Some of them were so badly burnt that they fused to whatever they'd been lying on. But that wasn't the worst part. No. The worst part was finding children curled up and burnt to ash. Trying not to think about it, he pushed on until he heard Cheeto barking in the distance. Picking up his pace, he moved through the debris, zeroing in on her location. As he got closer, a gunshot rang out. And he heard a man shout out,
Get back!
Followed by Cheeto growling. Now in full sprint-on mode, Alex ran to the next turn and caught sight of them. Somehow, the guy had managed to climb up on top of an old bus and was doing his best to aim at Cheeto, who was circling him. Alex took aim at the guy with his rifle. Alex whistled to call Cheeto to him, then shouted,
If she dies, so do you. Toss the gun and climb down.
Partially complying, the guy tossed the gun and shouted back,
I can't. My leg's busted. I barely made it up here. Can you give me a hand?
No. Climb down on your own or fall down when I shoot you. Your choice.
To make sure the guy took him seriously, Alex fired off a warning shot, which seemed to do the trick. Once he was on the ground and Alex was sure he was unarmed, he had a few questions.
Where'd you come from? And how many are in your group?
Nervously stammering, he explained.
There were 10 of us, and we came from Colorado. We were ambushed by man-eaters. They killed 2 of us, captured the rest.
Alex paused, then shook his head. That was the second time he heard someone refer to the cannibals as man-eaters. Placing his finger back on the trigger, Alex tensed up.
How do I know you're not one of them?
Seeing his shift in moods, the guy on the ground did his best not to make any sudden moves.
One of who? The man-eaters? Hell no. I don't eat meat. I'm a forager. I eat off the land. Couldn't even bring myself to kill that dog. Makes you think I'd kill a person.
Bullshit. I heard the shot and saw you aiming at her. You're from that town. How many more are coming?
I only had 1 bullet and I fired it in the air. I was hoping pointing the gun would scare it off, and what town? I don't know what you're talking about. I told you, my group was from Colorado. We were passing through the mountains when we were ambushed by man-eaters. After they captured us, the weather got bad, so they had to hold up in an abandoned mine. Turns out the place was full of wild dogs, and they attacked us. That's how my family and I escaped. We came here, robbed some guy, then got captured again. They kept us for a while till some of their guys got killed, then split us up. They were taking me and a few others somewhere when they spotted smoke coming from another camp in the woods. 2 of them rode out on horseback, but they never came back. After a couple of days, we overpowered the last of the guards and escaped. I came back here hoping to find my wife and daughter.
With Cheeto standing nearby and growling, Alex looked the man over and noticed before responding.
It was you. You're one of the assholes that robbed me. You, the woman, and the little girl. I should shoot you, grimy bastard. All this shit is your fault. You brought those freaks to my door. Wait. What's your name?
Luther, but please don't.
Shut up. You clubbed me over the head and left me to die. Then you led those animals right to me, not once, but twice. That wasn't good enough. Oh no. You came back, potentially leading them to me for a 3rd time. Fuck you, Luther. I hope they find you and eat your feet first, which would be good because that leg looks infected. I'm not gonna shoot you though. Nah, that would be too easy. I'm gonna leave you out here to starve to death. On the bright side, maybe that infection will do the job, and I'll find your stinking corpse when the snow melts.
With that, he turned to walk away, patting his leg to signal Cheeto, Then Luther called out.
Wait! Wait! I know a place that's safe. It's where I was going to take my family. If you help me find them, you could come with us.
Without turning around, Alex replied,
I'll pass. See you in the spring.
Then Alex continued walking away.
Well, listeners, tonight we close out our adventure with a couple of rules from the wasteland. Rule 1, always have a backup plan. Life has a way of changing in a heartbeat. Never put all your eggs in one basket. Rule 2, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't. Trust no one. Last but not least, Rule 3, paranoia is your body's way of keeping you prepared. Don't ignore it. As the sun sets on another day in the wasteland, I bid you a good evening. This is Steve Taylor, your host, signing off from Outpost 7. See you next time for more dark and disturbed tales. Ha 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 ha!